Overwatch Season 11 has finally started, and we got a big patch that changed a lot of different characters in the meta. But more than that, we have seen how some characters over the past couple of seasons have really fallen down and become much weaker and pretty much impossible to play. And in this video, we're going to go over the biggest losers that we don't suggest you main in Season 11. Now, we just got to 80,000 subscribers, but it only says 20% of people that watch my videos are subscribed. So if even double that subscribed, we would be well past 100,000 subscribers. So if you've ever watched a video of mine and you enjoy the content even a little bit, press that subscribe button. I would appreciate it. And let's jump right in. Now, the first character we got to talk about is not a character that got buffed and nerfed in this patch. It's just a character that has slowly but surely become obsolete in the meta, and really it's incredibly hard to get value on this character, and it's Hanzo. Now, I'll say that Hanzo used to be one of my best characters. He was one of the original characters I got to Grandmaster with in Overwatch 1, and he was a character that I played a lot in Overwatch 2. And at the same time, and I knew this, of course, as I keep an ear to the ground in the community, he was the most hated character. No one likes one-shots, and I was a very vocal advocate against one-shots for Hanzo, and I still am. I don't want one-shots on a character, especially from range. It feels really cheap, it feels super powerful, and while there were some really cool things that you could do with Hanzo, like turn the tables on someone chasing you out of nowhere, be able to like one-shot a character when they have all the advantages if you hit a crazy shot at the last moment. I like those aspects, but there's too many downsides to having a one-shot in the game. But the problem with Hanzo in his current state, and the thing that I've always said, is that if you're going to get rid of his one-shot, which they did, you have to give him compensation in the form of a giant kit rework, because as is, the character is just a weaker version of so many other characters and doesn't provide anything unique or powerful at all to a composition. From range, he's going to get outclassed a lot of the time by characters like Widowmaker in efficiency. Even characters like Ashe are going to be able to output more consistent damage than him. Not to mention, he's a very inconsistent character. He's really weak to dive, so he can get dived really well. He doesn't get that much value just in the neutral game, and his peaks are not going to make up for his lack of neutral because he can't one-shot consistently anymore. So you add all those things together to the character, and he doesn't really fit anywhere. Like, as much as we didn't like and we wanted to get rid of one-shot, or a lot of people did, you gotta understand that that was like 90% of the reason to play the character. So if you take away that, you're heavily nerfing the character in comparison to many other characters in the game. Like, let's take a character like Ashe, who's similar in the positions that she'll play sometimes. There's some amounts of similarities between the characters. Ashe is going to be pretty much effective from the same ranges, and it's going to be hit scan, so it's going to be more reliable, more consistent. Ashe has better ways to do splash damage with her dynamite on a consistent basis. She has a better, more powerful ultimate. She has a little bit worse mobility, I will say, when compared to Hanzo, because Hanzo can wall climb and lunge, but that's the only thing that Hanzo even has a little bit of, and Sonic Arrow is fine, but with no longer being able to one-shot, getting information is not as powerful as it was before on Hanzo. So you combine all this together, and Hanzo is just a weaker version of many other characters, and not a character I would suggest you maining right now. It's really, really hard to get great aim on Hanzo. He is very unique in the way that you have to aim, so you have to practice him a lot. But you're just not rewarded for being really good mechanically on the character right now, and because of those reasons, I would say don't main him in this season. Now, the next character that we got to talk about, a loser of Season 11, is someone that was directly targeted with the nerfs, and that's Kiro. Swift Step, her teleport going up a second, is a pretty big deal. I mean, you're not going to feel it all the time, but there are going to be moments where a Kiro is going to be killable when normally they wouldn't be, and it's also going to decrease her uptime overall. Less cycles she can go on. She's going to have to wait a little bit longer before starting her flanks or things like that. So this is all going to be a big negative to the character, but even more importantly than that is the protection Suzu no longer cleansing hard knockdown stuns. So things like Earth Shatter are going to be more effective, and there's just a couple of things overall that Kiro is going to be less effective against. And just all these nerfs that have kind of been building onto Kiro for quite some time, where she gets these small nerfs over and over and over again, have slowly crept her into a place where she's pretty hard to get value with. Like, she's really good in the hands of someone that really knows what they're doing. She's really good in the right compositions. She's hard to dive, things like that. Some type of Lucio, Kiro dive. She's really effective in pro play, but in ranked play, people are already struggling with Kiro. People have been struggling with Kiro for quite some time, and this is only a step away from that. And when I say ranked, I say like most players, like 95% of players are going to have a lower than average win rate on Kiriko because she's not easy to play. She requires good mechanics, good timing, and all these nerfs keep compounding against her to the point where her bottom floor value is going lower and lower, where it's just hard to get value. Like, if you really want to climb as easy as possible, I would not suggest Kiriko at all. I think she's an incredibly powerful character still, but I also do think that she's a huge loser of this patch, and for most people, I would suggest another character to grind and play and main in Season 11, and honestly for the past couple of seasons, but this is kind of just like the little bit of a nail in the coffin for Kiriko, for the average player, more or less. But let's actually move on and talk about Rein, because we just talked about how Rein's Shatter is a little bit more effective, and I also want to make sure that I'm a little bit of a dream crusher here to say that this is not going to make Rein all of a sudden playable, okay? A lot of people are like, Rein's back, we can actually shatter people again. That's not enough. It's not enough to make Rein effective anymore, because Rein's problems are fundamental, and I wanted to put Rein here specifically to showcase that Rein is still one of the weakest tanks in the game by quite a margin. And the reason that Rein is so weak is that he's pretty ineffective in the neutral. He naturally needs a person to enable him, a tank to enable him. He's probably the character that got hurt the most going into 5v5 from 6v6. He doesn't have a natural pairing. He doesn't have any way to contest flanks or off angles. And these things are just really important for a lot of tanks. They really need the ability to deal damage to things on off angles or contest them directly. And most characters can. Most tanks can that see legitimate play. Rein cannot. Rein has to physically go up there, physically be in the brawl. And generally, Overwatch 2 is just far more flanky. There's just way more angles. There's people flanking, going around, fighting in these little isolated skirmishes. And that doesn't really fit like Rein's bread and butter death ball, bread and butter brawl. And there's other characters with better mobility that can enable these type of fast brawl-esque or mobility-esque compositions. So you add all these pieces together, and Rein has just been a little bit left behind. Like, he's not unplayable in the right hands, and on certain maps, there are certain maps where the corridors are tight. I think King's Row is one of his better maps, and there's other maps that, as long as it's not too far in range, there's not too much mobility. Like, he's pretty bad on every Flashpoint map, Havana, Junkertown, all of these long distance maps, a lot of King of the Hill maps. He's not going to be great either. So there's a lot of places where he's not great, okay? I don't think that you can't just sandbag, pick this character, and lock him in and have a great time. And there are consistently, every single season, Rein one-tricks in top 500. So I don't want you to think that you can't play Rein, you can't make him work. Of course you can if you get good at him. That's true with all these characters. There's going to be a Hanzo in top 500. There's going to be a million Kirikos in top 500. That's not the point of this video. It's just to say that Rein is still a really weak character in the overall meta, and he's a rather weak character to grind and main in ranked. So if you want my suggestion, I would say not Rein right now. Even if that Kiriko nerf got you a little excited, I wouldn't get too excited about it, to be honest. Now, number 4 on this list is Sojourn, and it's about freaking time I get to put this goddamn character in the losers list, because this character has needed a nerf for a very long time, and what they have basically done is they have increased this character's effectiveness at the floor and massively decreased this character's effectiveness at the ceiling. Less burst damage with Rail, still gonna do a lot of damage, still gonna be great for dueling, but not as huge of a chunk of HP. Is just gonna be slung at you from across the map with hit scan fire, and in addition to that, really great players were hitting consistent rails with Sojourn, which made her ceiling just way too high, which we're not going to see nearly as much. Now, is this character still going to be good? 100% it's going to be good, but not to the level as it once was. And for most players, so the average player, the player that wasn't hitting a lot of rail shots, those players are going to actually get more value on this character. There aren't going to be as high of peaks with the rail, but it doesn't matter if you get as many rails because the other parts of her kit are going to be a little bit more effective. But still, this is going to be a net negative to the character. For the people that thought this character was busted, this is going to be a net negative to the character, because I've always preached that if you're like underneath the Masters rank, most likely, that Ashe was just better for you than Sojourn. I've talked about that a lot, where Ashe is more reliable, has a better ultimate than Sojourn unless you're dominating and hitting every headshot, and it's just going to be able to be just a better version of a very similar character with the effective ranges and the duels that they take. But as you got better and better, Sojourn became better and better, but I don't really think that that is true anymore, and even if Sojourn does edge it out, it's going to be close, and Sojourn isn't going to be as strong with as high of peaks, not able to take over a lobby nearly as much. And these are all big things that, in my opinion, are big big dubs because I hate this damn character. No, I'm joking. But honestly, this character has been way too busted in relatively high elo for way too long, and I'm really excited that they have taken real nerfs to this character that don't make the character unplayable, but make this character weaker at the higher echelons of skill, because there's always just a Sojourn that just takes over a lobby, and it feels like a lot of the time, Sojourn is the best character to play, and it just objectively was the best character to play if you could play her. But moving on to the next character, we gotta talk about Lifeweaver, and I have been probably the #1 hater to Lifeweaver. I've been a consistent #1 hater to this character because I think in general, if you want to climb, if you want to take matters into your own hands, you need to be proactive. And I have coached Lifeweavers and tried to help Lifeweavers. And this is one of those characters that I would call a 51-49%er. And what I mean by that is you could play 100 games and you're going to win 51 of them instead of 49 if you played perfect Lifeweaver gameplay. And this is probably a huge exaggeration. But what I mean by that is the amount of impact you have is very minimal. It's very slight. It's to the point where you're not going to be able to ever take over a lobby. Like if you're a god tier Ana, you're going to have like a 60% win rate or 65% win rate, and you're going to dominate these lobbies. You can't do that on Lifeweaver. You can't do that on a character like this. And add to it the fact that I've consistently said that a character that can't do damage and be proactive has no form of proactive abilities, a platform that doesn't really do anything that normal routing can do except on very specific situation and maps, and it only works like a tiny percentage of the time because you need communication to make it work. And a pull that might either tilt people out of their mind or at the best case scenario is going to be like worse than a burst heal, an ability that would have prevented your teammates from getting in that situation, a Suzu, or the list goes on and on. There are going to be a couple of niche scenarios where grip is better, but you also got to understand the cost, which is the tempo negative cost. You're pulling someone completely out of a fight. You're pulling your tank out of the fight. And if you could keep them in the fight, but then help them and keep them alive and sustain them, that's just better because it's not tempo negative. You're not taking someone completely out of the entire area, the entire space. And there are so many other characters in the game that Lifeweaver just anti-synergizes with so freaking much. Pretty much the only true weakness of this character is that this character can't die. That's it. This character cannot die. Very, very difficult to die, very difficult to kill. Beefy, has a lot of ways to heal himself. These are the reasons you play this character, but let me tell you a little secret. Learning good positioning on other characters and staying alive that way, and then you don't have that weakness, and then just dominate with your abilities is going to give you much better returns. It's going to ease your development as a player. Now, I think that Lifeweaver can be okay as a secondary or a third option in your kit, as a character that you can swap to in the moments where you're being heavily targeted and you're dying too much. Lifeweaver can be a character that is just really, really hard for enemies to interact with, and at the very least, you're gonna live and you're gonna have very low deaths. And I think those are really, really important things to win some games. But as far as maining this character, I would not suggest maining this character at all. I would say that it's a huge L for Lifeweaver this season and over the past couple of seasons. And yeah, for all two of you Lifeweaver mains, I'm sorry, but I would probably put the Lifeweaver down this season. Now, number 6, this one might get a little bit of pushback, a little bit of hate, and you know what? It's the truth that needs to be said. I'm putting Doomfist at number 6 here. Now, don't get me wrong, Doomfist can be amazing in the right hands and with the right team around him. Doomfist is going to operate on these cycles and this opportunity where you can go in, you can bait out a ton of cooldowns, you can mass CC the enemy team, and if your team goes in and follows up, it can be amazing. But there's a lot of things that are hard about that. And the first one is you need teamwork and people that will go in with you. The average player in ranked, most people in ranked, even in all the elos, you're not going to get that often, and you have to basically play Doomfist as this type of punch bot, you know, cycle bot where you're just going in, coming out, going in, coming out. And playing Doomfist in that neutral style is just going to be worse than a lot of other characters. I think another part that's really hard is that Doomfist has a ton of characters that can counteract him and harass him and deal with him. He can get marked by a lot of different dive characters. He could get hacked. He could get stunned. There's just so many other characters that are going to come after you and make it really hard for you to do what you want to do, not to mention things like Sleep and Suzu, that if people time these properly, good luck. It's going to be incredibly hard for you to get any value at all. And then add to it the third thing, which is Doomfist is going to work 5 times harder to get the same amount of value as most other characters. And most players that commit to the Doomfist know this. They know that that's the truth, but they do it anyways. They grind Doomfist. And if this is you, I mean, you have a Doom disease. It doesn't matter. You're going to play this character no matter what I say or not. You're probably not even watching this damn video because you're locking Doom. But for the rest of you, if you're thinking about picking up this character, realize that you have to put in so much to get so little out of this character. And yes, if you become amazing at this character, you'll start to see things that you can do on this character that you can't do on anything else, ways you can carry on this character that you couldn't carry with other characters. But you have to work so incredibly hard where you would be able to get that value much easier on like 5, 6, 7 other tanks in the game. Now, I say all this, will I still be locking Doom? Yeah, I got the Doom disease too. I'm still going to lock this character, but do I understand that it's going to be hard to get value on him and there's going to be some frustrating games? Yeah, I understand that too. But next off on the list, I'm doing some more dream crushing here. We got Genji. And yeah, Genji is just not very great. He's good when things are going right, and he's bad in any other situation. And there's a lot of reasons for this. His burst isn't as reliable. While his ultimate is a bit more reliable in the neutral, Nano Blade was one of the main reasons to play this character before, and that's just not as effective anymore. And really, the thing that hurts the most about Genji is that he's pretty poor in that neutral game. He doesn't have a lot he can do when his team is not hard engaging. And he's really bad in any composition that doesn't have the entire team inting on targets. Like, if you're full diving, yeah, you can get value out of Genji because you just have to add a little bit, and then you get the chain of momentum with your dash, dash, dash you can go in, right? But if you're in 1v1 situations or isolated flank situations or any of that, Genji's going to be a little bit of a liability compared to, you know, characters like Echo and Pharah and Tracer and Sombra. These characters are going to be more reliable at fighting from other angles, getting burst damage, having better neutral game than Genji is. And unfortunately, having a really strong neutral game is just important overall. There's a lot of standstills. There's a lot of team fights that are, you know, people vying for position. And subsequently, Genji is just a little bit lagging behind many of the other characters in the game. Now, is he unplayable? No. If you become a god with him, can you dominate most lobbies? Yes, you can, up to a certain rank. But this doesn't mean that this character is doing really well this season. He's doing pretty poor this season. I think he's rather unplayable in a lot of situations. And overall, I would not suggest picking up Genji right now. I've put in the most amount of hours into Genji out of any character in the game, and then my second most DPS is Hanzo. I have this giant amount of time that I really would have wished I put all that time into freaking Tracer instead. I mean, it would have just been way better. At number 8 on the list, we have Mercy. And I think actually most Mercy mains will heavily agree with me that Mercy is in a really weak state overall right now. Whether it's the mobility changes, whether it's the fact that pocketing a DPS is just not as reliable as it once was. That's not as big of a reason to do that, and I think Blizzard has done a good job at like targeting a lot of these breakpoints and the reasons to get pocketed. Or it's the fact that Mercy just can't defend herself and she gets hunted and targeted by the really active mobility that is going on in the game. Everyone can move, everyone can chase, and Mercy is getting targeted more than most. I think all these things are true, and it's causing Mercy mains to just have a really rough time relative to previous seasons. Now, granted, I don't think that pocketing with Mercy is completely dead. I think there's a couple of characters, namely Echo and Pharah, that are still insanely strong with the pocket. They're just phenomenal with the pocket, and definitely the duos that you should be locking if you want to get value consistently on Mercy. You're going to be able to do a ton with those characters, being able to enable them a bit more, especially just spamming in the neutral. And then you don't necessarily need to go in with them, but, you know, you can pocket someone else when they're spamming in the neutral, some hit scan on your team. But Mercy is just in this weird space where there's so many other better options, I would say, before Mercy. But having a guaranteed synergy with, like, the best player in your lobby, like if there's a really good DPS player, being able to enable that person, keep them up, keep them alive, resurrect them, that's going to get you a lot of value because it's forced synergy. But still, every time you have a Mercy under composition, think about what you're not having. Think about the damage, extra bits of utility that you don't have. Think about the BAP you're not playing, the Honor you're not playing, the Zen you're not playing, the Brig you're not playing. And not only does it become hard to justify Mercy compared to those other characters, but Mercy also can become the vulnerability in your composition that gets targeted and the reason that you lose team fights. Now, next up, number 9 on the list is actually Ratra. And Ratra is only really showcasing his weakness in the past couple of seasons. Namely because pound for pound, if we're talking about poke, there are characters that are better at doing it. There are characters that are better at poking in general than him, whether we're talking about Sigma, even Mauk is better at poking a lot of the time than him. And then when we talk about Brawl, you would rather have characters that can force the engage themselves or have a better source of sustain. So if you want a Zarya or if you want a Junker Queen, these characters are going to be better at forcing a Brawl composition. And while Ratra can play both sides of the field, making him a really great character to learn how to play the game with, a great character to play because he's going to be okay in every team composition you play, he's not going to be a slam dunk. And there's always going to be a better tank that is going to get more value at doing what you're trying to do on average than Ratra at his current state. And, you know, small tweaks to this character can knock him back into meta because he's kind of on that line where you buff him a little bit and then all of a sudden he actually is better than some other characters at doing some of their jobs too, and then he gets to do a little bit of everything. But right now in his current state, he's a little bit vulnerable, he doesn't have great mobility, he's a little bit weak to a lot of cooldowns and utility, and he's gonna get slept, targeted, punch, stunned. And I do think that this is one of the weaker seasons of Ratra that we've seen in quite some time, but I wouldn't be surprised if like a small tweak here or there all of a sudden makes this character amazing to play again. But yeah, in a meta of high mobility or a meta where you're gonna get constantly javelined or punched or, you know, shot with a far rocket from across the map, I wouldn't want to be locking in Ratra compared to many other tanks right now. And then last up 10, Mei. And Mei did receive a buff and a nerf. The icicle is smaller, but it does more damage. And the more damage is cool. Don't get me wrong, but you got to understand that Mei has been consistently underperforming. She did not need a buff and a nerf. She needed just buffs to make her better. And once again, Mei's a character that doesn't have great mobility, is not going to be able to lock down a lot of mobility tanks. Mobility is at a huge premium right now, and if you wanted to make Mei better, you would most likely just want to make it so she can just hit icicles and they just do more damage, not that they are harder to hit. You ideally want them to be the same amount of difficulty to hit, so you could still hit divers and things like that. Characters with mobility, you can catch them and hit them with a lot of burst damage. So overall, doesn't fix the core weaknesses of Mei, doesn't make Mei fundamentally better, and the meta just as a whole, very mobility centric, and Mei just doesn't really fit right now. So even though she did get somewhat of a buff, it's not enough, and it really should have just been a straight true buff across the board. So yeah, Mei, unfortunately, not your season in season 11, and you kind of suffer from a lot of the same weaknesses that Ratra has right now. But you know, you might not agree with me, and if there's anything you disagree, definitely let me know in the comments down below, or if you're gonna lock some of these characters anyways, let me know, and let me know why down below. Do me a solid and smash that subscribe. Only 20% of you are subscribed, and I really want to get to 100,000 subscribers before 2025. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.